It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday. You didn't sing the one. This was our one job.
This was not a song.
It is
This
Tuesday.
is Christina already fangirling. You're not allowed. This is me reining you in. Stop it. We have a special guest.
We do.
Christina, take it away.
We have this most special guest. Oh, no offense to the other guests. You're all awesome as well. Oh, I'm doing really well here. Michelle Lee is a news anchor for KSDK, the NBC affiliate in St. Louis, which I always thought was St. Louis, but I was wrong. And she's been there for less than a year. She previously was in Seattle. We'll talk about that later. Raised in Missouri near Kansas City. I don't think I know anyone who has been raised or near or lives in any of that area. I must visit at some point. And she is the brain movement founder, human hero person behind the Very Asian Foundation. And I love this story so much. I know that I'm going to have to rein myself in here because I actually found Michelle when I was watching my Asian news feeds on Instagram, my daily practice, and I saw this woman who was holding up a phone or listening to a voice note from a woman who had said that thanks to a New Year's Eve food segment that Michelle was on and talking about various foods, this woman called and said that Michelle was being very Asian and should keep her Korean to herself.
Anchor mentioned something about being Asian and Asian people eat dumplings on New Year's Day, and kind of take offense to that, because what if one of your white anchors said, well, white people eat this on New Year's Day? I don't think it was appropriate that she said that, and she was being very Asian, and I don't know. She can keep her Korean to herself.
The racially charged dumplings. That is my... the racially charged dumplings.
Because, I mean, and since then, Michelle's been on The Ellen Show. I've watched countless videos, not only because I think the story is really fascinating in how it's turned around, and we'll get to that later, but also because this woman in front of us right now is such a beacon of joy and light. And I know, sorry, this is like the best introduction ever, because I swoon. It's like whenever I see Donna Benedicto or Beatrice King, our previous guest, I just swoon. So Michelle, I want to say thank you, because I found you on Instagram. I wrote to you, and then I got a message back from you like within minutes, and I lost my shit. And was just literally
this is me like being like, tone it down. Like, I had messages in all caps like spamming me. Check your Instagram.
But then my voice note to Raquel, I remember being like, just stay calm and say it like it's every day. Like it's an everyday thing. Just be calm. You're an actor. Use your tools. Anyway, Michelle, welcome.
Oh my gosh. I don't deserve that.
You 100% do.
So much. Thank you so much. I'm like in total shock and awe and humbled. And I don't know if you probably can't really see, but I'm super blushing. I can't believe it. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's my pleasure. That's what I look like with one glass of red wine. So
yeah, I'm like a half a glass and I'm full bright, you know.
Hashtag very Asian.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What do they call it? The Asian flush? Yeah,
yes.
That's me.
Yeah.
A real thing.
Exactly.
A real thing.
So, Michelle, tell us in your words, because you'll be way less fangirly than me, about where you grew up, what it was like, how you got into journalism in the first place.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're going way back. Let's see. Well, I grew up, I'm an adoptee. I'm a transracial adoptee, Korean adoptee. So born in Korea and raised in Missouri. So came over when I was like 6 months old and then grew up like country. My husband will say, not only are you white, you are country white. And I mean, I'm not, but I mean, that's how I grew up, right? Because we literally jumped hay bales for fun. We went to bonfires on the weekends. We went backroading and mudding and like all this kind of like.
Sorry, what is muddin?
You can't say it like mudding. You know, it's like M-U-D-D-I-N-G.
Is that like 4x4ing in the mud?
Yeah, basically.
Oh.
And you just do it with your vehicles. You know, you just do it with like someone who's got a big truck. And you just...
Okay, I thought you were going to say like a Toyota, like a small... I was like,
well, you can do it in a Toyota too. I mean, so, you know, we were doing that kind of stuff as kids, like just being total ding-dongs, like out in the woods. And, you know, and like my best friend growing up owned a hog farm. So like fun for us was like chasing the hogs. I mean,
I was going to say, did you catch them? Did you do like the...
No, I mean, they were totally pinned, but you know, they had like, she had like 200 hogs and we'd run up and down the, you know, their little pins and scare the hogs and they'd run back. I mean, terrible, but there was no harm. I mean, they were like, they would just be by the fence, and then we'd run and be like, and then they'd run back.
But like pigs are scary.
Yeah.
Pigs are scary. They attack people. They're heavy. They have like sharp teeth. Like they're scary. I had a friend who had one and we had to like run from it. They were scary.
They are really, that's an actual fact. Like if you know anything about hogs, they get ginormous and they can be very scary.
Can I ask?
Also very smart too, but
What's the difference between a pig and a hog? Like,
is there a difference?
Is there a difference between a pig and a hog?
I don't think there's a difference.
Oh,
I think a hog is just like I just think of like a full-grown pig.
She's using her Kansas terminology. That's
right. I see. I was like, because I didn't
not a
know
hog
if there was a
expert,
difference.
so I don't know.
Well, you chased enough of them, Michelle.
I know. Well, so I'm just saying we were like, you know, fishing and hunting and mudding and backroading and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I grew up. And then
Wait, can I ask you something? When you grew up in Kansas, was it ethnically diverse? Were there lots of different?
Oh,
no.
God, no.
Okay. Well, I don't want to make assumptions. Like I know what I see in TV shows, but I've never been, so I don't want to make an assumption of what it's like there.
So have you ever seen the movie Winter's Bone?
No.
It was like Jennifer Lawrence's breakout movie.
Oh.
It was like my life was like a little bit like Winter's Bone, but like less depressing. But definitely like that actual movie was set in Southwest Missouri. That book and that movie. I was not raised in Southwest Missouri, but there's still a lot of country elements to it. And actually, and this is a serious note. There were a lot of kids in my class who a lot of families in my class who maybe were like middle to lower income families. You know, meth is prevalent in Missouri. Meth is prevalent in Missouri in my generation. Not saying that like meth, our town was methy. I'm just saying that there were some elements that were just kind of gritty too. And so I grew up in Missouri, and then Kansas City is actually Kansas City, Missouri, and then there's Kansas City, Kansas. So most of the time when people refer to Kansas City, they're actually referring to Kansas City. Actually, when people are referring to Kansas City, they're referring to Kansas City, Missouri. Like Kansas City Chiefs are in Missouri. Then there's
they are a sports team that
So it's kind of confusing. Kansas City Royals, also Missouri. And then there's Kansas City, Kansas, but it's like a whole different Kansas City.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
It's too confusing. But like Kansas is also where, you know, the Wizard of Oz, you think of like Dorothy. And I did go to school. I did go to college at the University of Kansas.
Which one? Missouri or Kansas State?
I went to the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So, you know, actually, just put it this way: there's like Kansas and Missouri are bordering states. So like, there's just a lot of mixing.
A lot of crossover. Right.
Okay. So you grew up in like white country, basically.
Yes, I used to joke that I was probably the only Asian person in the entire county. I know that's not true, but it felt like that. It felt like that a lot.
Okay.
I had no Asian friends until high school, and then there was another boy in my class whose family moved to our city from our town from Cambodia.
Can you remember what that was like when you first saw someone that looked like you?
I hated it.
What?
But he's also Cambodian. Cambodian and Korean look different.
I know. I mean, no, I didn't hate it, but actually, so my friend's name, and it's still, I'm sure his name is Kasal. And so people would always say, "Oh, Michelle, you and Kasal should be boyfriend, girlfriend." You know, and I'd be like, "What? Come on." But we were really good friends, you know. I haven't seen him in like 20 something years, but so it always made me nervous because wherever I went, someone would always try to connect, you know, like if there were two Asians in the room, they try to connect us, and I'd be like, I don't want it. So it was hard for me to, it was hard for me, like growing up, to actually connect to like Asian culture, Korean culture, just because it was always like, just because people always would assume that we were just going to be best friends or boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever. But I did go to Korean camps, like Korean adoptee kids. So like I love doing that.
That's interesting.
Can you tell us about that? What was that like?
How
did your parents even think to send you to that? What was that all about?
Well, in the beginning, like, so when I was probably a little kid, they would have like these, like, I don't know what they were called, maybe like adoption days or Korean heritage days. And, you know, back then, because I was born in the late 70s. So in the 80s, they would have, I mean, it was mostly Korean adoptees back then. And the adoption agency would have like one day where everyone could get together. And it was like the families would come together and they would just have a picnic, or they would do, you know, some activities. So that's kind of where I started doing things. And then we just moved around, kind of got disconnected for a while. But then when I was 14, there was a Korean heritage camp in the state of Oklahoma. Do you know where Oklahoma is? Or have you heard of Oklahoma?
Yeah, I've heard of it. From the musical.
Yeah, Oklahoma. Yeah. So I went to Oklahoma for that camp, and that's where I met all these Korean adoptees. So that was really cool because they would have like Korean heritage stuff where it was like you could learn, you know, how to make quick kimchi and like Korean foods and learn songs. But really it was just about being able to see other kids who not only looked like you, but like had parents like you or siblings like you and had the same experience.
A lot of adoptees.
A lot of the adoptees I knew were like the only Korean kids in their classes, you know, so that's a real, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, that was a connection for a lot of us.
I love that. Cool. I love that concept of the shared experience. And going back to like, I was just looking on Instagram today and there was a mixed race, like a Eurasian meme. And it was Eurasian bingo. And how many of these things do you tick off? And there's some kind of solidarity, like, again, Beatrice King, my friend, she goes by Isla. You see someone who's Eurasian in a room and you beeline. Like we just beeline for each other. We're like, oh my gosh, okay, shared experience. And because it's really rare. And I think that's a really amazing thing that your parents were so supportive to put you and find, and the adoption, I don't know if it was the adoption agency, but recognize the importance of having shared experiences and developing throughout your life in however niche that experience might be.
Yeah, I actually think that it helped me. I didn't realize what it was doing for me. I didn't realize what kind of confidence groundwork it was doing for me in those really tumultuous years. But I have since like gone back to Korea multiple times and also led adoptee groups back. And the ones who are the most, you know, the ones who just have like a really good trip back to Korea are usually the ones who have this shared experience of being around other adoptees. When the adoptees who've gone back to Korea and let's say that's their first experience smelling kimchi, you know, seeing other Asian people, you know, being in that space, it's really like kind of like a mind game. It's just really emotional and hard for them. So, I mean, not always, but that was just kind of like, that's a generalization, but
it can be.
Yeah.
And were you curious about your culture growing up? Like, because what I think is really cool about that too is it starts to build a foundation to have pride in your heritage and things like that. But I've heard from other people who were adopted or were in an area where they were maybe like the only Asian in a very white area, that for them, maybe they were trying to not show up as Asian or whatever. So I think having other people around who have those shared experiences, but then you're all learning together about your culture, brings a source of pride and kind of turns that on its head. So I don't know if that did that for you at all, or...
Oh, 100%. Because I actually, when I was just saying that story about my friend, who was Cambodian, I really didn't want to be any different. I wanted to be white. I just did not want to be different. I didn't want to be the person who stuck out. Even like in class, I remember we were studying like North and South Korea, and it was like people literally turned around in their seats when the teacher asked a question about Korea and looked at me, and I was like, okay, I remember being like in 8th grade being like, what? I don't know this answer. So I really, as a kid, did not want to know anything about culture, had no desire. It was embarrassing to me. It was kind of like shameful. I didn't probably put it into words like shameful back then, but I was always embarrassed. Like I remember there was like one place in our county that had karate classes, and my mom was like, well, do you want to do that? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do karate. Granted, if there was maybe Taekwondo, maybe that would have been a better suit for me. But at the end, I just didn't want to do anything that like could be remotely tied to Asian anything. And even in the heritage camps, we had to take all these little classes that I was not super interested in. But then through like osmosis, it was like doing something to me, like it was like, oh, well, that's kimchi. That's normal. It was like normalizing these things. And then slowly, like I was like actually interested in Korean culture, but more so interested in like the girls who looked like me, who were like, hey, let's go out after camp today and drive around Tulsa and do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, like that kind of stuff. And that was really the connection for me. But those are building blocks, right? So when I was in Korean Heritage Camp, one of my friends who was a year older than me, he went back to Korea after he graduated high school. And so he was a dear friend of mine. And I was like, well, if Parker's going to do it, I want to do it too. And so my parents were like, really? You want to go? Yeah, I want to go. So that's how I went back to Korea when I was 18. And that's when I met my birth family. And then my life changed forever. Like that was
What was that like? What happened?
Oh, how much time do we have?
We have time. We have all the time for you.
Well, I discovered that I had an entire intact Korean family. When I got to Korea, my mom Sharon packed like this photo album of like all of these things I did as a kid. And I was like, why are you giving this to me? And she's like, just in case, I don't know, you might need it when you're in Korea. You might meet somebody. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to meet anybody. But, so you go to the adoption agency, you ask to look at your file. And then I said, well, can I meet my birth family? Can you do a search for them? And they said, that's not how you do this. Like you go back to the United States, we do a search. If we find somebody, you come back. And I was like, 18, and I just started like bawling because I was like, what do you mean come back? I'm not coming back to this place. This is my one and only trip, And it's funny how things work because that social worker was young. She was probably only like 23, and I'm guessing she hadn't encountered a lot of people, at that point in her career. So she actually did a search on her own and like looked up my birth mother, found her. Oh. And she said, did you have a daughter? Would you, on this date, because she's here if you'd like to meet her. And so my birth mother was like, yeah, I do. But here's the kicker. She had to tell her husband, my father, that she had lied about my birth. because they were really poor when she was pregnant with me, and he was working on a ship. And so she gave birth to me in a free clinic. And when no one came and visited her, she relinquished me on the spot, and then told my father that I had died at birth. So he didn't know this whole time that I had been born. And the reason she was like having this moment in her pregnancy and all this is because I have 2 older sisters. One was 3 at the time. One was 1.5. And then here I was being born, and she was like basically a single mom. And if you've got kids, you know that like a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, you're like freaking out. And so then the third kid, me, was just like, she was like, I don't think I can do this. We're poor, and I'm basically raising these girls by myself. So then when my father came home, he got her pregnant right away. And so now there's a younger sister who's literally 14 months younger than me. Like she was just popping out kids, for a good, 5 years. So I have 3 sisters, 3 full sisters, and then my parents, and they're still married. So anyway, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in.
As an 18-year-old of like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
That's how it felt, because they were like, well, we found your birth mother. And I was like, oh, wow, she wants to meet you. Oh, wow. Your birth father didn't know you were born. What? You have 3 sisters, huh? And you've got a younger one. How do you feel about that? It was like very social work, like a lot of social work was happening on that first trip. So meeting them was really intense.
Did you know you wanted to be a journalist at that point? Like,
no.
Where did that come into it? Like, as you were doing this, you're living this story, and then you're living this news story, and you're like, I am news.
I am news. I didn't see it that way. I am news.
I am news. Michelle Lee, I am news.
Oh my gosh. No, I just think like for me, really what it was I got a scholarship to be in journalism. And journalism, is like this wide umbrella. So you can do like strategic communications, like sales or PR, and I thought, well, I think that I definitely want to do something that's like business or communications related. Mm-hmm. And then when I was a junior in college, I remember I was like, well, there's a reporting class. And I wonder if that would be something I'd be interested in. But back then I had such a high regard for journalists that I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't think I'm, good enough to be a journalist. But I was like, who cares? Like, who uses their degree? So I took the class. And then I fell in love with journalism, and I just, everything was kind of like a what if thing. Like, well, what if I have this degree in journalism and I'm pursuing reporting, but then I don't get a reporting job? No big deal. I'll just do something else. So everything was like kind of a baby step until, you realize like, oh crap, I've been a journalist now for 20 years. I guess that's just I guess that
was good enough.
I used my degree. I used it.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, like, you don't even have to be good, to stay in something for 20 years. Ideally you have a passion and it keeps you, going. But like everything I think in my life has been like, well, why don't we just try this? And if it works, it works. If it sticks, it's great. And if it doesn't, then we just move on to something else. And that's
where do you think that came from? Like, I mean, it just, because I watched a little clip of your parents as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And they're just like, they're amazing. When they were talking about in one of your interviews, one of the segments I watched, and they were like, we didn't know. And your dad was like, I didn't know if I was scared. when you went to Korea, like when talking about Korea, and it really struck me. People can really strike you in, I think, 10 seconds or less. And one of the things that struck me about them was they were okay with not knowing. And I think that's a really amazing trait. And like, shout out to like, your parents for being that way, because that's rare. And Raquel's mom's like that as well. My parents are like exceptionally so, like, but curiosity, leading with curiosity. And I think the question I have for you on that point is, How did you, having been someone who grew up challenging identity in very exceptional ways, how did you then say, okay, yeah, I'll be in front of screen and be a beacon for other people? Like, was that a struggle or was that pretty easy for you?
Well, you know what? It really, well, that's another thing. It's about the unknown and the chance. So originally when I went to school, I wanted to be a producer because the television component, man, I should show you some very early videos of me.
Send them. We'll put them in outtakes at the end. Oh, yes.
So bad. It was so bad. I don't know how anyone let me on TV because I looked like a 14-year-old boy. I mean, I just looked like, and I had these big glasses, you know.
I want to see these so much.
Oh, no, it's so bad. And I always I'd have my hair down, like, you know, like my hair back. And anyway, it doesn't matter. But I sent out 2 tapes, you know, because I actually thought producing was more my speed. I like having control over a newscast and all those things. But then I sent out 2 tapes and really I just got the first bite as a reporter. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to it's basically like you have to keep trying and like not really, for me, I never had the confidence that I could do something and achieve it. Like I never had the confidence like, oh, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to kick ass doing it. Like I was kind of like, ooh, maybe, you know, so I would just take like little baby steps and see like where it would take me, you know, like, well, I'll just give this a try and see, and then I'll just work really hard and maybe it will pay off. And there were many times when it was like, this isn't paying off. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And I think some of that comes from being challenged in your life, you know, just period. And it's you know, the idea of pivoting and having grit, and then just having also sometimes being exhausted enough to where you're like, well, I'm just going to keep going because I'm too tired to do something else, you know, and I believe in myself, but I don't really know where this is going to lead me. So I'm just going to keep chipping away. And suddenly, you know, it's like, what's the metaphor of like eating an elephant, you know? I mean, sometimes you're just like chipping away and you don't know what you're doing. And suddenly it's like, oh, I did this now. Like,
who made that phrase?
I was just going to say,
did that? Like,
I've never heard that.
Someone said this to me the other day. They're like, how do you eat an elephant? I was like, I don't do that. I'm not understanding.
Well, I don't.
Yeah, I don't. What's the matter with you? And they were like, no, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And I was like, this is terrible imagery. I can't unsee this now.
It is. It's so bad. It's really bad. But it is the idea of like, you don't know where things are going to take you. I mean, here I am, you know, early 40s, and I had just moved back to my home state. And the pandemic was actually really tough on me because we were living in Seattle, which was like my dream city. I loved it. Not necessarily my husband's dream city, but like my dream city, my dream station, my dream job. And then the pandemic happened and my show was put on hiatus. So I was doing other things. Like I was grateful to work, but I wasn't doing what I, you know, signed my contract for. And then my childcare totally like, you know, got pulled from me because our daycare closed indefinitely. And then my mom died. And so it was like, when my mom died, that was it for us. Like, we were just like, what are we doing out here? Like, we're so far away from people. We need help. We love our family. We want to be close to the best people around us. So we made the move back home. But when you come home, if you've ever left and then came back, sometimes that's a hard thing to do because it's almost like, I don't want to say this because I don't want to be insulting to Missouri, you know, but I was kind of like, is this it? You know, like, am I giving up because we're just coming home now?
Yeah.
This is just what we're doing. And I don't mean that because actually St. Louis is a really cool city, but you know, it is hard to kind of be like, oh, well, this is just what we have to do. So yeah, it was just a really hard thing a hard space to be in, I think, in this last year, you know, year and a half.
It's an interesting, and I think, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of friends of all walks and all ages and all cultures about coming home. The coming home piece is fascinating to me, and Raquel and I talk about it a lot as well. My parents live about 25 minutes drive away from me here, and And I couldn't imagine. I mean, number one, like my mother just literally keeps me alive with food. So she has like an entire freezer downstairs of food. And I go for Saturday walks with dad, and then we come home and we have, we have a meal on the weekends. And it's really tough to measure what phase you're in your life. And I tend to think of it through the lens of when I was first starting out in my career, then these were these destinations that I was like New York, LA, even Toronto compared to Vancouver for the industry I was in at the time. But as you grow and as you progress, I think your priorities change, and you have to marry them to those previous the previous drivers, and then find a way to drive them and prioritize.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that's such a huge, and having a closeness with family is, I've had conversations where some people are like, oh, I have to go back. And then other people who are like, I get to spend time with my parents now. Like, I'm going to make this work in this city. And yes, it's not ideal to not have all of Seattle be with you, but you get like deeper relationships instead. And you still have to go through the same process. Like, I still go through that process all the time where I'm like, I could be in New York, I could be in LA, but
I just want to transplant my whole family.
Right.
Bring them with me.
But even then, there's such amazing things about the place you're in. Like, you grew up, like, I miss Hong Kong right now so much. And especially right now because of quarantine rules, it makes it like so difficult for me to go. And my older sister's there, like, she's my soulmate. Like, it's just it's so hard to not. And I've moved back a couple of times, and it is very different because you're like, now I know these smells, I know these tastes, I know that I'm comfortable, I'm familiar, and you lose some of the hunger that you get in a new city that you're like trying to prove yourself.
I think that's it, though. It comes in one, I think it comes in seasons, because at least for me, and I think also for you, Christina, cities hold an energy. And I think for you as well, Michelle, because, speaking of Seattle, I think that's your energy city. Like, you have a really high vibration when you're in Seattle. You're like feeling it, you're gunning for the things you want. It's like your soul city. I think we all have soul cities, right?
Yeah.
It could be somewhere you've never been before, and you land and you're just like, this is it. Like, the vibe just hits right. I don't know why, but it is. There's other cities that will make you gun for things. Like, when I go to New York, I just don't sleep. I was like, if I moved here,
why would you?
I have no doubt I would achieve amazing things, but I would live like 10 years less as long. Every city has a different vibration to it. But I think it is difficult. Like, I understand what you're saying, Michelle, because I'm in a different place from Christine, and this past year and a half, I've been between 3 different continents. I've been in Europe, North America, and Africa. And I have so much draw from Europe and Africa for my soul, for what I want out of life. In Amsterdam, even, like I was just saying, I've been having to drive into Vancouver, and it's like an hour commute, and everyone's grumpy and they're honking, and it's raining and it's cold and it's like gross weather, and I don't know, it's just like not my vibe right now. And then I'm like, when I'm in Amsterdam, like, I'm on a bike and I'm biking to my destination, even if it's an hour commute, it's like a happy bike ride. And
yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Soul City.
Gosh. Yeah,
Michelle, I hope you get to, because I know that you were working for they're affiliates, right? So
they're sister stations. They're owned by the same corporation.
Yeah. And we talk a lot on this podcast and on this show about designing your bravest, fullest life. And I think one of the things that Raquel and I love, and what we're hoping every day that we get up and do a different bombshell thing, we're like, we just want to be able to design the ability to do these things. And it doesn't matter that you can't do it right now. It matters that you are able to put it into a plan. Yeah. And it matters that you can navigate. And Raquel, like, my goodness, this woman knows how to push me to stretch my ability to deal across time zones, across like not having internet, like, it's insane. But And we've had moments where, you know, Raquel's like, oh, we're going to have to deal with this now. I'm like, I'm going to have to find a way to build a building. I'm going to have to find a way to build a building and build and put things in so that there's childcare available for when she decides that she wants to have a kid. Or if either of us, like, we have to figure this out. We have to like plan it. Oh, it's
Christina's a planner. I'm like, we're gonna do this now.
No, you're not. You're not. We're gonna do this now. You're like, I've done it, and I'm like, oh, okay.
You can blame my mom for that.
Let me just build a bridge underneath you.
Oh my gosh, it's great though because you guys can balance out each other. You know, I mean, the thing that you're saying is so true, and then then we forget that like so much is out of our control, right?
Yeah.
So. The thing that I kind of forgot where I was going when I was talking about Seattle all of a sudden. I mean, because I do love St. Louis and everything that I had in Seattle, I like have in St. Louis, it's just, it was just, I had my son in Seattle, and you're working with all these companies. I mean, you're surrounded by all these companies who like make global decisions, like Microsoft and Amazon. And it just seems like there's like the vibration. Yeah, the vibration, right? Like, it's like these people are like changing the world. St. Louis also has that vibe too, but I'm just rediscovering it. So, but the one thing, it's like, here I was like coming home it's weird to be back in the state where my mom is no longer here, and that's been a real, like, I have a lot of grief work that I have to do, just transitions and grief. And, but then like, I'm in my 40s and I'm like, okay, are we going to have another kid? Are we not going to have another kid? Probably not, but maybe, you're thinking about all these like kind of decisions. Cause it's like, you got to shit or get off the pot, like, what are we going to do?
We have some great podcasts on fertility. And
I think those are
freezing.
better answers though. Like, we should just rename it to shit or get off the pot.
Yeah, you gotta, And I mean, we had infertility for 10 years, and still are in, technically still have infertility. So we have one embryo left and it's like all these things like, what are we going to do? But then like, and so then you're starting like, is this the decline of my career? Is this the decline of my creativity? Is this my half-life? Will I get to live to, my mom was only 70. Do I only have 30 more years left on this earth? You just start thinking like, or am I going to walk out and get hit by a bus? And then something like this happens where you put out this voicemail, say nothing, and the world says something in response for you and gives you this like new breath of fresh air. And it's like, you're going to start a foundation. You're going to be on Ellen. You're going to be like, you're going to maybe do something, make an impact in a way that you never thought imaginable. Then you're like, okay, well, am I ready for it? No, I'm not ready for it, but I'm here for it, So that's where I think it's, when I was saying, like, you're just out here living your life, you're just trying to get through the day. And sometimes it's just trying to get through the hour. And then you don't know maybe what the universe has in store for you, but are you ready to go? Probably not, but like,
you had a new purpose. I love that. It's like that purpose fueled you. And it was kind of the wind beneath your wings to like push you to where you needed to go. You
got Bette Midlet. You got Bette Midlet. That's what Raquel is trying to say. May we all get Bette Midlet at some point.
Well, we all need to rise. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing in this whole very Asian movement. I mean, it sounds, when I talk to my friends and I always have to say, like, this sounds so stupid coming out of my mouth. Because my friends are like, they're your friends. And you're like, the very Asian movement. Like, it's like, I believe it's a movement, but I mean, it just sounds silly coming out of my mouth, because it's like, what? But it's this whole idea of all of us rising together. Instead of us getting dragged down, we need to help each other rise. Creators, artists, like all these people who've like shared these amazing stories or like illustrations throughout this whole ordeal. We need to help amplify their voices, we need to have more bombshells, we just needed to do more because the need is there. I had so many people respond with, I'm a transracial adoptee, or I'm a person of mixed race, or I'm in the LGBTQ community and I didn't feel seen. Like, this spoke to me. And and here I was just living my life. I didn't know that I was speaking to somebody, and that's the kind of impact that we can all have. And I think that's, at the end of the day, we can all lift each other up, and make an impact that way. If that makes any sense.
It makes all the sense. And I think one thing that I would say to you in my trying not to be super fangirl moment again, is that you said that you weren't ready for it. And maybe you weren't, but you were built for it. Because so many people will not take a message like that and hold a mirror up for the world to see it. And that one clip, what struck me so deeply was that you made it immediately in true journalistic fashion, not about you. And that's a really rare thing to do, because when there's so much pain and there's so much direct impact and anger towards you as the individual, misdirected entirely, to be able to hold up a mirror and say nothing was what was so exceptional to me.
Wow.
And
well,
so,
thank you.
Yeah. And so when you say I hope that everyone watching and listening right now, we'll put this clip up and we'll put some other clips of Michelle up, but understanding that when someone, tries to direct and shoots poison, it takes a really, really strong person to fight it, but it takes an honorable human being to hold a mirror up to it and not say anything at all, and let the world stand up. What you said on Ellen was the world stood up for you, and they couldn't do that if you didn't let them. And I think that's something I learned from, because I will often try and find a way. Raquel knows I'm like constantly throwing my hand up for some cause and this thing. And I'm like, this is wrong and socially not right. And my older sister laughs all the time because I'll like find ways to go help people. And she's like, you don't need to, like, people can help themselves also. But this reminded me, and I think what was so wonderful is that this came about from you being the embodiment of that. Through your whole life, you're like, you approach with curiosity. You allow things to happen. You go, oh, this is happening now. You're Raquel, basically. You are Raquel.
I am Raquel. Well, it's funny. I did say this to my bosses because I had to tell them, like, this is what I want to do. I want to, have this foundation, because I felt like really like the money that Ellen is giving me, I could take it as income, right? Or like donate it to another cause, or I could make an impact in a way that I felt would be meaningful. I mean, there are a lot of other great organizations out there, but so I guess, what I was thinking, like, I wasn't ready, but at the same time, looking back, and this is what I think everyone can relate to. You look back when something happens and you go, but wait, this was a building block. This got me here. This prepared me for this moment. This led me to this. You don't realize that all of these experiences that you've had literally from like birth to today have really been building blocks to get you to take the leap or to, do something a certain way. And so I feel like, we don't cherish our life experiences enough to think about how they're really preparing us for maybe a big moment, or maybe just having the right decision. So it's all kind of, like I said, like kind of osmosis, you just don't realize what you're taking in when you're taking it in.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the conversation you maybe had with your employers when you were ready to post that video, because I'm assuming as an anchor, you have to run things on your social media past your company. So what did they say when you said, okay, I want to post this video of my reaction to this voicemail, because it was so money. It was so hitting the nail on the head. And like Christine said, it's so classy the way that you did it. But I'm really curious what they had to say about it.
Well, that's the thing. This is why I was a little scared, because I didn't ask. I just did it. Like, I was just like, well, I know that this lady's not like I'm not sharing her name, or whatever. So I just posted it. But actually, that's kind of how a lot of us do things. Like if we are out in a story, we're going to post something. Like I really didn't. I thought about it, but I didn't like overthink it, because if I overthought it, I would have called my boss, and then they would have said, "No, you can't air that. You can't share that." And so I don't know the right answer on that, because I feel like, if you were doing everything by the book, you would have called your boss, and then they would have whittled it down to where you didn't share it at all. And at the same time, I felt like that was directed towards me, and that was not that it was property of the stations, but it was still like intellectually, it was like it was at me, So I felt like that was a real personal thing. So I just shared it.
Oh, I love how brave you are. I love it. I love it.
But then when it started going viral, because you do put it out on social media, but you really think the few people who interact with your stuff are going to see it, right?
Right.
Even though you know that there's the capability of like the world to see it. So when it started going viral, I actually was like,
Pacing.
because I was like,
just sweat cloth.
Yeah. And luckily, my station was like behind me 100% right out the gate. But I also think, going back to the building blocks, like I was on our DEI team in Seattle. I'm on the national DEI group for our corporation.
Can you explain what that is? What is DEI for people who
diversity,
don't know?
equity, and inclusion. So, nationally, like we'll talk about, kind of like how we want to celebrate people, what is the right language for certain things. We do, we have actionable items that we hit on. And that goes out to all the news stations in the country. So it's like the building block of me doing the work, but not realizing that that it was building the confidence for me to share that. At the same time, if I was really thinking with a legal mind, I probably wouldn't have shared it, but that's just the risk you take.
And you got to take some risks.
Yeah.
And I love, because that's with your values. So you've built up this trusted pillar. It's not like it came out of left field. This is in line with your values. They know who you are. They hired and celebrated you for who you are. And so you had that safety net, right? Because it's, you built that.
And then it was even like I had this discussion with my director of content, who's like my boss. And basically it was like I felt safe enough to do that and to make that decision, not realizing that I was in that safe zone. So, I felt really supported before I even knew I was supported. But yeah, when it started going viral, I was like, oh my God, I started really panicking. And still somewhat, because everything's uncharted territory. I've never, started a foundation. I've never done this kind of stuff before. So you do have to also go through legal to make sure that you're ethical and making all the right decisions based on your front-facing day job, and then now your front-facing side job. I mean, a foundation, you can't get paid. That's like the legal setup in the States. So I can't get paid for my time. I just want to say that. But like, I don't want to be like promoting my foundation in a story that I'm doing, things like that,
Yeah.
There are just rules that you have to follow legally and then also ethically.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing. I think one of the things that strikes me as a through line of so many people we've spoken to on Bombshells and had amazing chats with is really that commitment to taking the time and investing it into ethically aligning with your values. And we have incredible guests who almost every single one have a social responsibility component in one way or another, or a commitment to community. And when I was reading up on career pathways the other day, I was researching, I think it was a Monster report that talks about the second most popular job title that was that people were hiring for was diversity and inclusion. Yeah. And I think that that's such a great testament to at least where we are progressing towards, where it's a normalized part of the conversation. But I want to thank you for taking it that step further, where it's, whether you're legally bound to do it or not, that you have to combine your foundational knowledge, your values, in order to really create a sustainable brand for this movement that has started. And you're not just riding this wave for you, you're riding a wave that other people built and are on with you. Like you're everyone's by everybody's side. I loved seeing those signs and the dumplings, the bakeries, and you know, people who are like, we're very
and the
Asian
dumpling
bakery.
squishy, the stress squishy.
I know. I like this.
Rage dumpling.
I want a rage dumpling. I want a rage dumpling.
I still like racially charged dumplings. But okay, I have one more question because I know we're running so over time, but I can't not ask this. Did she ever get back to you? Like, did you ever hear from this human again?
She did.
Okay. Did she apologize or was she angry?
No, she apologized. So okay, okay. I did this commentary, and I don't know. I haven't posted the commentary, but I've seen it out there. I mean, it's on ksdk.com if you want to see, if you look for the commentary. I just haven't posted it on my social media because I haven't had a chance to. I can't even tell you like how busy it's been, and I'm grateful for it. But I just haven't had a time to post that. So after that aired. I should say before my commentary aired, I called her and left a message and said, I just want to talk to you. No shame. You know, if you want to have a conversation with me, that's great. But you know, I just want to talk. And so we did the commentary, and she eventually called back and said, it's me. You know, I'm the one. And she was very sorry. And so the way I'm framing it is that she apologized, I accepted, and we're kind of moving on without her. But also in the same breath, race, bigotry, discrimination, hatred, all those things are complex. You know, it's not going to be solved in one conversation. We all bring very different perspectives to the table. We all have been wounded and scarred in many ways, and we're working on scar tissue, you know, so it's like, I didn't want to vindicate her because it wasn't like she was totally apologetic. I mean, she was apologetic for hurting me. She was apologetic for her words. But there were other things that I was like, well, okay, so let's talk about this because there's probably some work, you know, that could be done. At the same time, I'm not perfect and I'm not the authority. And I also don't have the bandwidth to make someone anti-racist, you know, so I was trying to give her some resources. But it's just complicated. Everyone is complicated. Relationships are complicated. At the end of the day, I really do feel responsible for her because now she's out in the world and her voice is out there. I've never identified her and I still don't even know her first name. But like, you know, I don't want her to like be afraid to like live her life because of this moment. Like
be on attack.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for anyone to get canceled. Like, I'm not a perfect person. I mean, I've done enough DEI training, taken enough DEI training to know that it's not if you'll offend somebody, it's when you'll offend somebody. And when you do, how do you respond when someone tells you that they're hurt? I mean, her words are pretty like clear, but I'm just saying no one walks in this world on the right side of things all the time. People make mistakes, but how you respond to it, I think, is the human part of it, right? And the right way. So, I'm not perfect. I don't want to shame her. And ultimately, I didn't get hurt. People took this and they made their own movement out of it. They made it a sense of pride and joy. And for a little bit, people were like, hey, and last year we were saying, stop hurting us, like stop attacking us. And for a moment in time, people were like, hey, I'm really proud to be very Asian. Even if I am mixed race, even if I am transracial an adoptee, even if I am, X, Y, and Z. And a lot of solidarity posts happened with it too. The best ones were like openly Black, very Jewish. I mean, just so many great stories that people shared with me. So long story short, I don't begrudge her. She gave us all a really good gift. and a conversation starter. And I wish her the best. And, you know, we said that we would meet each other one day when it's COVID safe. And, you know, I'll hold my end up on that and meet her if she still wants to meet me. This is before like everything went totally viral. So I don't know if she wants to. But I fully believe like people are, for the most part, good people. People come from places of ignorance, you know, and experience. But they're not necessarily hateful and violent or scary, because there are people out there who are, and who have attacked and, you know, had racist acts that ended people's lives. So this didn't happen in that case. So I just want to be, you know, kind of keep it as light as possible because of the outcome. I mean, I can't, this is changing well, as we know it today, this is changing the trajectory of my life. You know, I'm going to be a foundation person. So, you know, like, I'm grateful for that. I don't even know what you call it. Like, what's my
But I
title?
have so much respect for that. So on both sides, one, that you called her and gave room to have a conversation and to educate. And also on her end, that she called back. Whether she was perfect in calling back or not, I don't know, and it's okay, we don't need to dive into it. But I think it does take a lot of guts to own up to say, you know what, I shit the bed. Like, I'm sorry. That was uncalled for, you know, educate me more. Yeah. I think that does take such bravery, and that's something that we talk about a lot. I think I love that you're not kind of outing her name and not really pushing cancel culture, because I think we've talked about from the beginning of the podcast is that you have to be able to make mistakes in every facet of your life, whether that's going for a big dream or whether that's saying the wrong thing or having the wrong view. You need to be able to openly make mistakes in order to learn from them. And the only true failure is not learning from them. So I think for both of you, that was a huge, huge step forward. And I hope that, honestly, I hope that everyone listened to the end, because I think that is a really, really, really powerful takeaway.
Well, thank you. Well, it's funny because you think like, if I ever have a chance to talk to her, I'm going to kick her in her shins. I'm going to, you know, you like think of all these things.
In her shins.
But she actually, when she called, I was like, I did use the word brave. I was like, you know what? You're so brave for calling, and I really appreciate that you did that. So I couldn't be like, I'm going to find you and hunt you down. You know, I just couldn't be like that. And I think
hunt those shins down.
I'm gonna set my hogs.
Yeah. I mean, that's just not who I am. I don't think most people are like that. You know, you get that way on social media, maybe. I mean, I've seen it, but in real life, that's just not real life. So, I don't know.
It's not anymore. You've changed it. Oh,
no. I can't.
I was just waiting the whole time.
She needed her last hurrah of fangirling.
Honestly, Michelle, thank you so much. I can't wait for you to visit Vancouver. It'll be worth me trying to figure
Seattle.
out.
Maybe we'll do a Seattle trip. If you're there, we'll bomb up.
I love Vancouver so much, but I haven't been since 2016, maybe.
Well, you're due.
We went to what is it, like Gastown? And
it's so cute.
That sounds so cute.
I mean, that's the only one I can remember. I mean, we did a bunch of things. Oh, like the mountain. What's the mountain that everyone goes to?
Whistler?
No, not Whistler.
Grouse.
Grouse Mountain, yeah.
You did the Grouse Grind?
Yeah, and we did the swing bridge.
Oh, the Capilano suspension bridge.
Yeah, the suspension bridge.
Yes.
I'm trying to think what else we did. But anyway,
we did all the tourist things. We'll take you to all the non-tourist things.
Essentially, all the happy hours.
Literally, that's what I was thinking.
Perfect.
Oh, well, thank you again, Michelle. You're such an inspiration, such a lighthouse for so many communities, for every community, really. And yeah, I'll post all these resources, and we can't wait to stay in touch and support the movement and support the foundation.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I come back? Can I come back sometime?
Anytime,
100,000. Yeah.
You just let us know.
That's a dangerous question to ask me, especially.
New host, new co-host.
New host. Oh my gosh, yeah. I'll move over. I will move over.
Stop it, stop. I love you guys.
Oh,
Don't forget, hashtag very Asian.
yes.
Don't
Hashtag.
forget it.
Bye. Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.
Anchor mentioned something about being Asian and Asian people eat dumplings on New Year's Day, and kind of take offense to that, because what if one of your white anchors said, well, white people eat this on New Year's Day? I don't think it was appropriate that she said that, and she was being very Asian, and I don't know. She can keep her Korean to herself. All right, sorry. It was annoying. Because if a white person would say that, they would get fired. So say something about what white